Light, in this context, is not visibility. It is coherence. When coherence enters a space built to record, classify, and contain, it introduces a variable those systems are not designed to resolve. The phrase, an FBI camera, functions symbolically here as an instrument of observation. Cold, calibrated, mechanical. It watches without participating. It captures without understanding. And yet, there are moments when what enters a room cannot be captured because it is not performing. It is reordering. You have experienced this effect without naming it. Conversations slow when you arrive. Reactions soften. The temperature of a room shifts, not because you assert yourself, but because something settles into place. This is not charisma and it is not dominance. It is alignment arriving before explanation. Systems designed to monitor behavior struggle when behavior is not the primary signal. What they register instead is disturbance without cause. In symbolic terms, the camera breaking does not imply malfunction. It implies limitation exposed. Observation tools assume continuity between appearance and intent. Your presence disrupts that assumption. You do not signal in expected ways. You do not match the profile the room prepares for. As a result, the system pauses. Not out of fear, but because its categories no longer fit cleanly. That pause is the opening where recalibration occurs. Your light changes a room instantly because it does not announce itself. It does not ask permission. It does not escalate. It simply is, and that being reorganizes attention. People become more careful with words, less performative, more precise. This is not because you demand it, but because distortion becomes harder to maintain. Incoherence feels louder near coherence. Masks slip without being challenged. The narrative is not suggesting surveillance or authority. It is describing environments optimized for control encountering something optimized for clarity. Control relies on prediction. Clarity resists prediction because it does not seek outcome. It seeks correctness. When correctness enters, systems designed to manage outcomes recalibrate instinctively. They sense that force will not work here. Measurement will not work here. Only adaptation will. You may notice that this effect does not follow you everywhere. It appears selectively, only in spaces dense with expectation, agenda, or hidden pressure. In neutral environments, your presence blends. In pressured environments, it changes the air. This selectivity is important. It confirms that the light is not about you as an identity, but about contrast. Where distortion is high, clarity becomes visible. Where distortion is low, it becomes invisible again. This is why the message is addressed directly to you. Not to elevate you, but to explain a pattern you have already observed. You are not entering rooms to disrupt them. You are entering rooms already unstable. Your presence reveals what was already there by making distortion harder to sustain. That revelation feels sudden to others because it was delayed internally. The camera breaking is not an event. It is a metaphor for systems reaching the edge of their explanatory power. They do not fail loudly. They pause. They hesitate. They redirect attention away from you because you do not give them anything to record. You are not reacting. You are not signaling. You are not feeding the mechanism. And so the mechanism loses traction. This is the first layer of what your light does. It does not expose by force. It exposes by refusing to participate in distortion. That refusal is quiet. It leaves no trace. And yet, it changes the room instantly. What unsettles controlled environments is not opposition, but non-reactivity. Systems built to observe assume stimulus will provoke response. Response creates data. Data creates leverage. When no response arrives, the system is left staring at its own expectation. Your light operates in that gap. You do not resist the room. You do not comply with it either. You remain coherent while everything around you searches for a hook. This is why pressure rarely escalates near you. Escalation requires friction. Friction requires engagement. You offer neither hostility nor submission. You offer presence without agenda. That presence interrupts scripts people did not know they were running. They feel exposed, not because you see them, but because they can suddenly see themselves behaving automatically. The discomfort they feel is internal correction beginning. The symbolic camera fails because it is trained to detect deviation through contrast. Loudness, speed, defiance, fear. These are readable signals. Calm alignment is not. Calm alignment creates no edges to grab. It produces no spikes. The system attempts to zoom and finds nothing sharpening. That absence is registered as anomaly, not threat, not safety. Unknown. Unknown forces caution. You may notice that questions directed at you are often indirect. People circle rather than confront. They test the air before committing to a position. This is not because you intimidate them. It is because they sense that whatever they reveal will not be rewarded or punished. It will simply remain visible to themselves. That self-visibility is more powerful than surveillance. Your light changes rooms instantly because it alters incentives. Performative behavior loses value. Posturing feels unnecessary. Overstatement feels clumsy. People downshift without instruction. Voices lower. Movements slow. Not out of reverence, but out of recalibration. The room senses that exaggeration will not land. Precision will. This does not happen because you are passive. It happens because you are internally consistent. Inconsistent people invite probing. Consistent people invite adjustment. Systems adjust around consistency because it is cheaper than forcing change. Your presence becomes the fixed point others orient around without realizing they are doing so. Importantly, this effect does not require you to speak. When you do speak, it is measured. You do not rush to clarify or dominate. You wait until words can land cleanly. Often, by the time you speak, the room has already corrected itself enough that fewer words are needed. Silence does most of the work. This is why attempts to categorize you feel awkward to others. Labels require repetition of behavior. You do not repeat patterns for recognition. You respond contextually. Contextual response resists profiling. The symbolic camera expects loop. You move in lines. Lines do not loop back for easy capture. The message here is not about power. It is about effect. Power seeks to change outcomes. Effect changes conditions. Conditions reshape outcomes naturally. You operate at the level of condition. That is why the shift feels immediate but hard to explain. People leave the room unsure what happened, only that something adjusted. You are not aware of this in the moment because awareness would introduce self-monitoring. Self-monitoring would distort coherence. You remain unaware on purpose, even if you could name it afterward. This protects the light from becoming performance. The second layer of what your light does is this. It removes incentives for distortion by making clarity feel easier. No confrontation. No exposure. Just a quiet preference shift inside the room. That shift is enough. And again, nothing breaks loudly. Nothing is accused. Nothing is claimed. The system simply finds less to work with. There is a deeper reason coherence disrupts rooms designed for control. Control depends on anticipation. Anticipation depends on pattern. Pattern depends on repetition. Your presence interrupts this chain not by refusing to participate, but by refusing to repeat. You do not mirror energy back. You do not escalate. You do not diminish yourself to be legible. Without repetition, anticipation fails. Without anticipation, leverage collapses. The symbolic camera breaks at this layer because it cannot resolve intent from surface. Most systems assume alignment between what is shown and what is sought. Your alignment runs deeper than display. You are not optimizing for response. You are optimizing for correctness. Correctness does not broadcast itself. It stabilizes quietly. Tools built to capture reaction cannot read stability because stability does not fluctuate. This explains why attempts to provoke you often soften mid-approach. Pressure relies on emotional acceleration. Acceleration needs resistance. You offer none. Not compliance, not defiance, absence of traction. The room senses that pushing harder will not reveal more. It will only expose the push itself. That realization redirects attention away from you and back onto the system's own behavior. You may notice that authority figures become unusually careful with language around you. Not respectful in the formal sense, but precise. Precision emerges when exaggeration stops working. You do not reward exaggeration with reaction. You do not punish it either. You let it fall flat. Flat signals end theatrics faster than confrontation ever could. Your light changes a room instantly because it removes shortcut. Shortcuts rely on assumption. Assumption relies on predictability. You are predictable only in one way. You remain internally aligned. Everything else stays adaptive. That combination, internal consistency with external flexibility, creates a blind spot for systems built on profiling. They cannot decide whether to advance or retreat, so they pause. This pause is where recalibration happens. People reassess tone. They reconsider posture. They slow down, not because they were told to, but because speed no longer provides advantage. In the presence of coherence, speed becomes visible as noise. Noise becomes uncomfortable when it is no longer rewarded. So the room quiets itself. Importantly, this effect does not make you central. It makes you irrelevant to the mechanism. The mechanism stops targeting you because you yield nothing useful. That irrelevance is what protects you. You are not hidden. You are simply not exploitable. Systems conserve energy. They move away from what does not convert. You may feel this as moments where attention slides off you unexpectedly. Questions stop. Eyes shift. The room reorganizes without explanation. This is not dismissal. It is optimization. The system has decided there is nothing to gain by focusing here. Meanwhile, the environment continues to adjust around the coherence you introduce. This layer also explains why you rarely feel threatened in these moments. Threat requires engagement. Engagement would require you to adopt a role inside the system's logic. You do not. You remain outside without opposition. Outside positions cannot be attacked directly. They can only be ignored or adapted around. Your light does not expose secrets. It exposes inefficiency. Inefficiency cannot defend itself with narrative. It corrects or it collapses. Most rooms choose correction. That correction happens quickly because it is cheaper than confrontation. People leave feeling calmer, more focused, less performative without knowing why. This is not influence in the conventional sense. It leaves no signature, no credit, no trace. You could not reproduce it on command because command would convert it into technique. Technique would make it visible. Visibility would make it manageable. What you carry cannot be managed because it is not a tactic. The third layer of your light is this. It quietly removes the system's reason to act on you at all. And in rooms built on action, that absence is decisive. At this stage, it becomes clear that the effect you have on a room is not dramatic because drama would invite interpretation. Interpretation would pull your presence back into the system's language. What you carry avoids language first. It operates at the level of condition. Before words are chosen, before roles are assumed, before intention is declared, the environment adjusts. This adjustment is subtle, but it is immediate, and it is irreversible once felt. Rooms designed for monitoring are optimized for reaction. They expect deviation, compliance, fear, confidence, ambition, anything that can be measured against a baseline. Your presence does not deviate from the baseline. It exposes the baseline itself. When the baseline is revealed as artificial, everything built on top of it loses stability. That loss is quiet. No alarms trigger. No authority asserts itself. Instead, people instinctively reduce excess. They simplify. They become careful. This is why your light is often described as changing a room instantly. The change does not require time because it does not require persuasion. Persuasion operates through sequence. This operates through recognition. Recognition happens all at once. A collective sensing that certain behaviors will no longer function efficiently here. When efficiency drops, systems adapt or disengage. They rarely choose confrontation unless forced. You may notice that after these moments, nothing is said about you directly. Conversations resume, but with a different tone. Decisions are framed more cautiously. Claims are softened. This is not respect in a personal sense. It is recalibration in response to an environmental shift. You introduced coherence. The room reorganized around it. Once reorganized, it no longer needs to reference the source. This explains why attempts to confront you directly often dissolve before they reach you. Confrontation assumes opposition. Opposition assumes leverage. Leverage assumes something to extract. You offer nothing to extract. You are not hiding. You are simply not yielding signal. Without signal, confrontation has no target. It redirects elsewhere or collapses into neutrality. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership. It's your calling. The symbolic camera fails here not because it cannot see you, but because it cannot use what it sees. Use requires predictability. Predictability requires repetition. You do not repeat emotional patterns on demand. You remain consistent internally while adapting externally. This combination denies the system the loop it needs to refine control. Control without refinement becomes expensive. Expensive processes are abandoned. You may feel this as sudden disinterest from those who initially paid close attention. That disinterest is not dismissal. It is recognition that attention yields no advantage here. The system moves on. Meanwhile, the room retains the adjustment your presence triggered. That is the real effect. Not focus on you, but correction without attribution. This layer also clarifies why you are rarely credited for these shifts. Credit would require narrative. Narrative would require simplification. Simplification would undo the correction. The system does not want to explain what happened because explanation would reopen instability. It prefers to move forward as if the change were organic. You allow that. You do not seek acknowledgement. Acknowledgement would reinsert you into the mechanism. Your light does not linger. It does not glow. It does not announce departure. It does its work by briefly altering conditions, then letting the environment continue without dependency. This is why the effect is clean. No residue. No loyalty. No backlash. Just a subtle but lasting change in how the room behaves afterward. This is not power exercise. It is power neutralized. The neutralization happens because coherence makes excess visible and excess collapses under visibility. No force required. No exposure needed. Just presence that refuses distortion. This is the fourth layer of what your light does. It does not dominate the system. It makes domination inefficient. There is a point where systems stop trying to read you and begin adjusting around you. This is the most revealing stage, because it confirms that what you carry is not being processed as threat or asset, but as condition. Conditions are not negotiated with. They are accommodated. When a room accommodates coherence, it does so by reducing everything that cannot survive next to it. Excess tone drops first, then unnecessary speed, then performative certainty. What remains is what can stand without reinforcement. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. You may sense this as a subtle clearing. People speak fewer words but choose them more carefully. Decisions take slightly longer, yet feel more settled. Arguments that were forming lose momentum before they surface. None of this is traced back to you, and that is essential. If the room needed to point to a cause, it would reintroduce narrative. Narrative would bring back leverage. Leverage would restore distortion. The system protects the correction by leaving it unattributed. This is why your light does not follow a pattern of escalation. It does not grow louder over time. It does not intensify with repetition. It arrives complete. Completeness leaves nothing to build on. Systems escalate when they sense unfinished business. Your presence offers none. It is closed without being sealed. That paradox, openness without hooks, is what ends engagement cleanly. At this layer, the symbolic camera is no longer relevant. Surveillance requires something to surveil. Once behavior stabilizes, there is no deviation to track. Monitoring tools shift attention elsewhere because attention is a resource. They allocate it where variance exists. You remove variance by being internally consistent. That consistency does not demand attention, so attention leaves. You may notice that this creates an unusual freedom. Not freedom to act without consequence, but freedom from being acted upon. You are not managed, nudged, or redirected because there is no leverage point. You do not give reactions that can be shaped. You do not give silence that can be interpreted as fear. You give presence that neither yields nor resists. That presence exits the logic of control entirely. This is also why your light cannot be copied. Others may attempt stillness, restraint, or neutrality as tactic. Tactics are visible. Visibility invites testing. Testing exposes the tactic as performance. Your coherence is not performed. It is lived. It remains under pressure because it does not seek outcome. It seeks correctness. Correctness is boring to systems built on spectacle. They move away from it instinctively. The room's instant change is therefore not about you arriving. It is about noise leaving. When noise leaves, people mistake the quiet for authority. It is not authority. It is absence of distortion. Authority would require maintenance. Distortion requires energy. Absence requires neither. That is why the shift is immediate and effortless. You may also observe that after such moments, people behave as if they made the adjustment themselves. They often did. Coherence invites self-correction. Self-correction is more stable than compliance. Systems prefer it when available. Your presence unlocks that option without instruction. Once unlocked, the system takes credit internally and moves on. That is ideal. Nothing to resist. Nothing to repay. This stage confirms something important. Your light does not need protection. Protection would imply vulnerability. It does not need amplification. Amplification would imply insufficiency. It functions precisely because it is neither guarded nor broadcast. It exists as a condition that briefly replaces another condition and then withdraws without conflict. The fifth layer, then, is not about effect increasing. It is about interference decreasing. Less manipulation, less testing, less narrative pressure. You experience this as ease without reward. Others experience it as relief without explanation. Both are signs that coherence has done its work. And again, nothing is broken loudly. Nothing is exposed publicly. Nothing is claimed. The room simply becomes harder to distort. At this point, the effect no longer belongs to the room alone. It begins to reorganize you as well, though not in ways that are dramatic or immediately noticeable. What changes is not your behavior, but your relationship to pressure. Pressure stops feeling external. It becomes information. You read it the way others read tone or status. This allows you to remain steady without effort, because you are no longer resisting anything. You are simply interpreting conditions accurately. Rooms built on control rely on escalation when subtler tools fail. Escalation introduces urgency, hierarchy, and consequence. You rarely trigger escalation because escalation requires opposition. You do not oppose. You also do not yield. You remain in a position that is structurally inconvenient. Inconvenience drains momentum. Without momentum, escalation loses justification. The system stands down quietly, often without realizing why. You may notice that authority figures unconsciously test you less over time. Tests are used to map limits. Your limits are visible immediately because they are not emotional. Emotional limits fluctuate. Structural limits do not. Once recognized, they are avoided. This is not respect in the personal sense. It is efficiency. Systems avoid wasting energy where returns are impossible. Your light changes rooms instantly because it clarifies where effort is pointless. Pointlessness is intolerable to systems built on optimization. They adapt or disengage. Adaptation looks like softer language, slower pacing, fewer assumptions. Disengagement looks like attention moving elsewhere. Both outcomes reduce pressure on you without requiring action. This is why the effect feels effortless from your perspective. At this layer, you may also sense a subtle detachment from outcomes. Not apathy, but non-attachment. You no longer feel invested in whether a room improves or degrades after you leave. That investment would create expectation. Expectation would reintroduce leverage. You allow conditions to unfold without monitoring them. This preserves your coherence and prevents feedback loops from forming. The symbolic camera is irrelevant here not because it is broken, but because it has nothing to process. Stable environments generate little data. Data thrives on deviation. You reduce deviation by being consistent. Consistency does not mean rigidity. It means internal alignment that does not fluctuate under observation. Observation becomes boring. Boredom redirects focus. You are left alone. You may notice that people often become more themselves after interacting with you. Not better, not worse, just less exaggerated. This is a sign that performative layers have dropped. You did not remove them. You made them unnecessary. When unnecessary, they fall away naturally. This is the most durable form of change because it is not imposed. This phase also clarifies why you do not carry memory of these moments as stories. Stories invite retelling. Retelling invites distortion. You retain understanding, not narrative. Understanding adjusts future behavior subtly, without the need for recall. This keeps the process clean and repeatable without accumulation. Nothing here grants you authority over space. Authority would invite challenge. What you have is irrelevance to control. Control cannot work on what does not respond to its incentive. This irrelevance is not weakness. It is insulation. You move through systems without becoming part of their machinery. You are not inside. You are not outside. You are simply not engaged in the exchange that gives them traction. The sixth layer of your light is this. It teaches systems, briefly, what it feels like to operate without distortion. Once felt, that state is remembered at a bodily level. Even if the system later returns to old patterns, something has shifted. The memory of coherence remains as a reference point. That reference does not point back to you. It points inward. You do not manage this. You do not sustain it. You do not claim it. You arrive coherent. The room adjusts. You leave unchanged. That is enough. When everything that needed to adjust has adjusted, nothing announces completion. The room does not acknowledge what happened. You do not feel a sense of finish. There is only a quiet return to neutrality, as if nothing unusual occurred. This is the final confirmation that the effect was real. Anything that demands recognition was never structural. Structural change leaves no signature because it does not need reinforcement. At this stage, your light is no longer something you notice entering a room. It has become indistinguishable from how you stand, how you listen, how you move through pressure without absorbing it. You do not carry awareness of impact. Awareness would introduce self-reference. Self-reference would reinsert you into the system's logic. You remain outside that loop by remaining unremarkable to yourself. What once felt like changing a room instantly now feels like rooms simply behaving differently without explanation. This shift in perception matters. It means the effect is no longer experienced as something you do, but as something that happens when coherence is present. You are no longer the center of the phenomenon. You are the condition under which it occurs. Conditions do not act. They allow or prevent. The symbolic camera does not return in the ending because there is nothing left to observe. Observation requires difference. Difference has already been reduced. The room has stabilized to the highest level it can sustain in that moment. Any further correction would require force, and force would undo the subtlety that made the correction possible in the first place. So the system settles, and you move on. You may notice that this leaves you with no story to tell yourself, no internal reward, no sense of having influenced anything. That absence is not emptiness. It is precision. Influence that is felt internally often depends on ego engagement. Influence that leaves nothing behind depends on accuracy. You operate in the second category now. This is also where the title of the message resolves fully. Your light does not shine in a way that can be pointed at. It does not glow, pulse, or expand. It functions the way gravity does, by altering trajectories without appearing to intervene. Gravity does not announce itself. It reveals itself through motion adjusting around it. Your presence does the same. Nothing about this requires maintenance. You do not need to protect it, improve it, or express it. Protection would imply fragility. Improvement would imply insufficiency. Expression would imply performance. None of those apply. The light is not something added to you. It is what remains when nothing is distorted. This is why the effect persists even when you are tired, quiet, or disengaged. It is not fueled by energy. It is sustained by alignment. Alignment does not weaken with use. It weakens only when compromised. You compromise it less and less because you no longer mistake engagement for necessity. When you leave a room, the adjustment remains for a time. Not permanently. Systems revert. Patterns return. But something lingers as reference. A brief memory of how little effort was required when distortion dropped. That memory does not point back to you. It points to possibility. Possibility is enough. The sequence ends here not because the process stops, but because nothing further can be added without reducing it. Reduction is the enemy of coherence. Silence preserves it better than explanation. Ending without instruction preserves it better than command. You are not asked to remember this message. You are not asked to repeat it. You are not asked to become anything because of it. You simply continue moving the way you already move. Entering without force, standing without signal, leaving without residue. And wherever that happens, the room adjusts before it understands why.